Mr. President.
Senator from Hawaii.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to cover what I think are the 7 worst aspects of this tax bill. The first thing is that this is not a middle-class tax cut. Credible, independent analysis of this bill found that the richest 1% in the United States get $85 billion of the benefits in the year 2019. These Americans will get a tax cut of more than $55,000 per person, while taxpayers who fall in the middle of the road will get a couple $100. And many in the middle class will pay more because of this bill. People making $30,000 or less will see a tax increase of about 10%. Even foreign investors do better than the middle class in this bill. Now, what do I mean by foreign investors? I mean people who don't live in the United States, but who own stock or are investors in American companies. In 2019, they will get a $48 billion tax benefit. That's a bigger benefit than more than half of the rest of the country will get from this bill. You have to work hard to design a tax plan that helps the middle class less than this one does. In fact, the Washington Post looked at this plan a few weeks ago and found that it was the worst tax plan for the middle class in 50 years. And here's the thing, it shouldn't be that hard to do a middle class tax cut. You just do a middle class tax cut. Number 2 reason this bill is horrible is it is primarily written for special interests. Republicans couldn't give the middle class a bigger tax break because they needed all of that money for special interests. Real estate firms will see an immediate 16% decrease in taxes next year. For families that own and develop multi-million-dollar hotels, that makes this a great bill. Big banks and financial firms also win. Over the next 10 years, financial firms will save $250 billion. Over the next 10 years, financial firms will save $250 billion. The biggest single beneficiary, Wells Fargo. Now, what I remember from last election was that the lesson that the voters were teaching us across America was a populist lesson, that they were sick of financial institutions and the very powerful politically and the very powerful economically running us. And here we are giving a massive tax break to Wells Fargo with an estimated 18% boost in earnings just for Wells Fargo. This is not a bank that has been a good player recently. They are mired in scandal after they built customers into buying auto insurance and created thousands of fake credit card and bank accounts. People are not getting a tax cut. Corporations are getting a tax cut. And no one knows how we're going to pay for all of this. Which brings me to number 3. If passed, this bill will increase the federal deficit by a minimum of $1.5 trillion. Now, with $1.5 trillion, we could pay down every single student loan in the country and still have money left over for middle-class tax cuts. Instead, we're going to make sure that Wells Fargo investors have another banner year. You know, there was an entire group of Republicans elected to the Congress on the premise that the federal debt and deficit was too high and that we needed fiscal discipline and fiscal responsibility, and now they are adding $1.5 trillion to the deficit. Number 4, this bill is just bad economic policy. Now, it is premised on the idea that if you provide a tax cut for corporations, that they'll share it, essentially. That you give money to a corporation, and they take that money and they reinvest it in their physical plant. They make additional investments. Maybe they build a new factory, or maybe they pay their people more. Now, that sounds great. Here's the problem. The corporate sector is sitting on an unprecedented amount of cash already. The corporate sector has lots of cash already. And so we have a lesson in what they will do with extra cash, right? If they were going to use extra cash to pay their people more or to invest more in physical infrastructure or expand their businesses, they would already be doing that because they're already sitting on record amounts of capital, but they are not doing that. What they're doing is stock buybacks and dividends. And in other words, they are paying off their shareholders. When a group of American CEOs was asked what they were going to do with the windfall money that they're about to receive, they did not say they were going to pay their people more. They did not say they were going to invest more in expanding their businesses. They indicated that they're going to do what they have been doing with their record amounts of cash, which is pour it back into stock buybacks and dividends. So this is bad economic policy. Forget the moral part for a moment. Even at the macroeconomic level, this is not smart. Number 5, this is bad policy because it's a bad process. This bill was written in secret, it was rushed, and it was 100% partisan. We know it didn't have to be that way. And one of the things I said to some of my colleagues with whom I have a strong relationship is I said, listen, why don't we try to do this subject to a 60-vote threshold? Why don't we try to find bipartisan agreement? And then listen, if you find that we're operating with you in bad faith, if you find that there is no room for compromise, drop the threshold down and do it with a 51-vote margin. But at least you will have exhausted the possibility of bipartisanship. They started with 51 votes. What does that mean? That means they never wanted to listen to Democrats. That's why this process is so flawed. And now, the House just sent over a bill which is so messed up, they're going to have to vote again tomorrow. And they're already talking about on top of the vote tomorrow to fix the garbage that they sent over this afternoon, they're already talking about an additional technical fixes bill to do next year. And this is the product that you get when you don't have public hearings and when you don't have bipartisanship and when you don't take your time. Number 6, this bill is bad for health care. People's premiums are going to skyrocket, and 13 million Americans are going to go without health insurance. Number 7, this bill increases income inequality. This bill changes our tax system to reward wealth over work. For me, American capitalism is about you work hard, you have a good idea, and you are rewarded. It is not about your dad was rich, he passed the money down, and you are rewarded. American capitalism is about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, but what we're doing with the tax code is unprecedented, except for during the Gilded Age. What we're doing with the tax code right now is saying we value already being rich more than we value someone who's climbing that mountain. Now that is a foundational moral question. Do we value work or do we value wealth? And the problem with this bill, and we can go through process and policy and politics, but the foundational problem with this bill is that through this document, we are declaring that we value people's wealth that already exists. We value passive income more than we value earned income. And that's not good for the United States of America. That's the problem with this bill. We are telling people that we value people already having money more than people who are climbing that hill. And that's why I oppose this bill so strongly, and I think that's why people across America, for the very first time, at least in recent history, but maybe in American history, that you have a tax cut bill that is so deeply unpopular because people understand what a rotten piece of legislation this is. I urge my colleagues to oppose it, and I yield the floor.